Breakfast at Tiffany's. When you hear the title, you think of Audrey Hepburn wearing Givenchy, and maybe you think it's a classy rom-com you could sit down and watch with your mom. Which it isn't. My mom would have needed a very deep fog of denial to watch this, since essentially it's a film about a pair of sex workers. Now, this isn't Pretty Woman, which is mostly about the woman leaving her lifestyle by hitching herself to the coattails of a very successful man, and in true Hallmark fashion, teaching him a thing or two along the way. This is closer to the original Pygmalion myth, or even closer to George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion. Except here there's two sorcerers, and they each kind of create themselves. Most famously, you have Holly Golightly.
Is she or isn't she?
Is she or isn't she what?
A phony.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think so, huh? Well, you're wrong. She is. But on the other hand, you're right. Because she's a real phony.
We meet Holly in her New York glory having breakfast at Tiffany's, wearing that little black dress and forlornly chewing on takeout. No explanations are offered, just an oddly introspective socialite. As the story unfolds, we learn that Holly, born Lula Mae Barnes, has fled her Texas Dust Bowl town for New York via Hollywood. In a cruddy apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a no-name cat, she's created a whirlwind party pad that attracts millionaires and Brazilian politicians.
If I could find a real-life place that made me feel like Tiffany's, then I'd buy some furniture and give the cat a name.
Meanwhile, her neighbor, Paul Varjak, has let his own capabilities slide.
I'm a writer, I guess.
You guess, don't you know?
Okay. Positive statement. Ringing affirmative. I'm a writer.
However, he's accepted an apartment as a gigolo for a rich married woman. Holly forces Paul to start writing again, to reinvent himself as himself.
Tell me, do you write every day?
Sure.
It's a beautiful typewriter.
Of course. It writes nothing but sensitive, intensely felt, promising prose.
But there's no ribbon in it.
There isn't?
No.
Paul, it should be said, is almost 100% a product of this film. The narrator of the source novella remains nameless, whereas the movie obsesses about Paul's name.
9 Lives by Paul Varjak.
What do you
No,
think?
it's Paul, baby.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
I thought it was Fred, baby.
No.
Hey, Mr. Fred. Varjak.
Really? Varjak Paul. 9 Lives by Varjak Paul. He's Varjak Paul in person.
Pray to the order of poor Varjak.
My name is Paul. Paul Varjak.
Varjak. Paul Varjak. V-A-R-J-A-K.
Hey! Now get lost, will you?
And this is Paul Varjak.
Varjak. V-A-R-J-A-K. Paul. Paul Varjak.
V-A-R... Mr. Berman, this is Fred.
Oh, Fred baby, huh?
Lots more can and has been said about the adaptations made to make this film, but here I really just want to look squarely at the movie itself. Movie Paul and movie Holly cross paths a couple of times. Paul tries to comprehend the toll that Holly's lifestyle is taking on her. First, he helps prep her for a meeting with a notorious gangster at Sing Sing, for whom Holly acts as an obvious and willfully oblivious go-between.
Snow flurries expected this weekend in New Orleans.
Snow flurries expected this weekend in New Orleans. Isn't that just the weirdest?
He shelters her from one of the sleazy New York businessmen who think that giving her $20 for the powder room awards them certain privileges.
Oh, come on, baby. Open the door.
Paul, who is no stranger to sleaze, lets Holly cuddle up for a platonic snooze. Holly has no idea what platonic means, so she starts calling Paul Fred, the name of her possibly mentally challenged younger brother, the only other man with whom she's had a non-transactional relationship. This movie hit me in the early 1990s, around the time of R.E.M's album Monster, an album full of anti-love songs. One tune, crushed with eyeliner, sounded as if it had been written by Paul Varjak himself. She's her own invention. She's a sad tomato. She's 3 miles of bad road. I am smitten, and I'm the real thing. We all invent ourselves. How can I convince her that I'm invented too? What can I make myself be to make her mine? And this movie is all about inventing yourself and your surroundings. Holly, trying to cut off her Dust Bowl roots, uses New York as a blank canvas on which to invent her own reality. It's her personal Disneyland. She reimagines Tiffany's as Fantasyland. The library is Adventureland, and the Five and Dime is Frontierland. Everyone she comes across accepts these fantasies as if they're real.
Don't you just love it?
Love what?
Tiffany's.
But Tomorrowland for Holly is always some rich man, which betrays the limits to her imagination.
He happens to be the 9th richest man in America under 50.
Now that indeed is a remarkable piece of information to have at your fingertips.
Paul is not a rich man, but
I'd marry you for your money in a minute. Would you marry me for my money?
In a minute.
So I guess it's pretty lucky neither of us is rich, huh?
Yeah.
he is the real thing. And that's where director Blake Edwards steers far away from the Truman Capote novella. Edwards made a career on fluffy but extremely cynical films, and he never surpassed his work here.
Do you think she's talented? Deeply and importantly talented?
No. Amusingly and superficially talented, yes, but deeply and importantly, no.
He reorganizes Capote's character study into a rom-com, which brings with it both the formula's idealism and a certain cynicism about its characters. The book's narrator's infatuation with Holly is probably entirely platonic, since he's quite possibly gay. Breakfast at Tiffany's is a Rorschach test. A young, idealistic person will see a hopeful romance where true love can triumph over poverty and fear. Sheer will and style overcomes all obstacles. An older person coming to the same movie will see a couple of people who sell their bodies to survive, launching a doomed relationship amid mental illness and a misguided desire by the hero to save the heroine. I have a friend who saw this for the first time in his early 40s with his wife. They were looking for a fun romantic flick on a Friday night. He knew how much I loved the movie, so he called me up afterwards. "What was that?" he asked. That wasn't romantic. Those people were disgusting. I hardly disagree with the first claim. The movie is definitely romantic, with both a small and capital R. But I will have to concede the second point. The movie's central characters are very compromised people. They are the quintessential examples of that old Oscar Wilde quote, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." I recall as a kid loving Rodgers and Hammerstein and all that Broadway stuff, and then suddenly being broadsided by the realization that stuff ain't like that. You can sing Some Enchanted Evening, but then realize that the hot southern racist you love is going to struggle with your half-caste kids for her whole life. Or that Henry Higgins really does mean,
"Eliza, where the devil are my slippers?"
That the Phantom of the Opera is fascinating, and Raoul is not. And once the Phantom loses out, well, Christine's got a life full of dull, rich boy problems ahead of her. Breakfast at Tiffany's goes for the jugular on all these problems and really offers no solutions. Paul and Holly have no idea what they're doing. Paul has enough optimism and energy to plow through their problems, but Holly is too scared to even name her cat. We don't know that this is going to work. But let's be honest. Every morning you get up and you don't know if this is going to work. Breakfast at Tiffany's is brilliant fantasy minus the fantasy. It's rom-com minus the romance. This video is fondly dedicated to my old friend Stacy Cobalt. Stacy, tie your shoes. And just for the record, yeah, all that stuff with Mickey Rooney really should have been scrapped. Super racist.